Hi, my name is State Representative Tommy Vitolo, and I want to share with you some information about the upcoming town election. But before I do, I want to make sure you know how to get in touch with me. 617-872-8921 is my telephone number. Call me anytime. Or you can send me an email at tommy.vitolo@mahouse.gov. Now, about the upcoming election, it's on Tuesday, June 9th. It was pushed back from May this year because of the coronavirus. And the idea was to give us a little more time to get ready for the election and understand how the coronavirus will impact our society. We've got our hands around it at least a little bit, and we've got an election coming up. We'll be voting on select board members, school committee members, library trustees, a member of the housing board, and town meeting members. And to learn about all the candidates, you can go here, TommyVitolo.com/2020 Brookline candidates. I've put up their photos, I've put up their endorsements, and I've put up their responses to the League of Women Voter questionnaire, so you can compare all of the candidates all in one place. You can also see if they have a web page or a Twitter feed or something like that. Again, TommyVitolo.com/2020 Brookline candidates for all of the candidates in this June 9th election. There are a couple of ways you can vote. The way that I'm really excited about is you can vote by mail. You don't need an excuse. The state legislature passed and the governor signed a bill allowing everyone to be able to vote by mail. And the way you do that is you get yourself a 2020 municipal election early ballot application. And you fill it out, including the signature at the bottom. Now, this is really important. If you don't have a printer, that's okay. You can actually just handwrite all of this information and mail it in. Your name, your legal voting residence, your date of birth, your phone number and email address if you have them, where you would like the ballot mailed to, and if you have any special circumstances, like you require assistance to fill it out due to a disability. If you do, the assisting person's name and their address, and you've got to sign and date it. And then you've got to mail it back. Where do you mail it? You mail it to the town clerk's office at this address, P.O. Box 470806, Brookline, Mass. 02447. So you take that application that you've signed, or you hand wrote the whole thing, and you mail it to the town clerk's office, P.O. Box 470860, Brookline, Mass. 02447. And do it soon, because the election is Tuesday, June 9th. If you want to know where to get that form, you can get it here, TommyVitolo.com/vote by mail. Go to that page and you can click and pull the form right up, where you can print it or copy it and get it in the mail. And when you get it in the mail, the town is going to mail you an envelope that looks like this. This is my ballot, and I haven't opened it yet. So it says, read all instructions before voting. I will do that. I've made sure it's the one addressed to me and not to my lovely wife. When you open it up, you find inside, it's very exciting. You find that you get a few things. You get a return envelope, very important. This envelope does require a stamp, so you need to put your stamp on, and you need to make sure you address it to the correct town. Of course, that's Brookline, P.O. Box 470860, Brookline, Mass. 02447. And what you want to do is you want to read the instructions, of course, which are here. Read them carefully. And ultimately, what you end up doing is you fill out your ballot. Here is my ballot. I live in precinct 6. So my ballot looks like this. Yours may look a little different with different town meeting member candidates. You fill that out, and you end up putting it in this envelope, which you sign and write your name on, and make sure that you fill out all of this correctly and seal it. And then you put it in this envelope. You get that stamp on it, first class, and you get it back right away, because it needs to be received by the town by Tuesday, June 9th, the day of the election. I encourage you to vote by mail. Because of coronavirus, we do want to reduce our interactions within 6 feet, and we want to keep those who are civil servants and others working with folks every day as safe as possible, and that means limiting interaction. So if you can vote by mail, I encourage you to do so. But you can still vote in person. However, there are a number of important changes to our election day this year on Tuesday, June 9th. The first important change is that the polls are open from noon until 8 p.m. I'll say it again. The polls open at noon and close at 8 p.m. sharp. You must be in line by 8 p.m. for your vote to count. And that's on Tuesday, June 9th. 4 polling locations have moved because they are in places where we don't want the increased traffic. 3 are our apartment buildings, and the 4th is a fire station. So if you live in precinct 3, you would normally vote at 90 Longwood Avenue, but now for this election, you're going to vote at the Coolidge Corner School, and that's the Stedman Street entrance. If you live in precinct 7, you would typically vote at 61 Park Street, but on June 9th, you're going to vote in person at the Brookline High School Schluntz Gym. Similarly, if you live in precinct 10, you would normally vote at 190 Harvard Street, but you also would vote at the Brookline High School Schluntz Gym. And finally, if you would typically vote in precinct 15 and you want to vote on election day rather than use the mail-in, you would typically vote at the fire station at 962 Hammond Street, but instead you're going to want to go to Baker School to the lower level cafeteria. And that's how you can vote in person on Tuesday, June 9th from noon to 8 p.m. Lastly, and this is really important, we need poll workers to work all of these polls. And many of the workers, if you voted in the past, you recognize are older adults. And those are folks who may not be so interested in working on this particular election. And so if you have Tuesday, June 9th available from about 10:30 in the morning until 8:30 or so p.m., whole time, you can't do a half a shift, you could be a poll worker. It pays $175 and comes with lunch and some PPEs to keep you safe. If you think that might be a good thing for you to do some civic duty, go to TommyVitolo.com/poll worker, and you can read about what the requirements are and what the benefits are to decide if that's something that works for you. If so, please let the town clerk's office know immediately. As I said, they're really looking for poll workers. So once again, the election is Tuesday, June 9th. You can vote by mail. You can vote in person. You can go to TommyVitolo.com/2020 Brookline candidates to make sure that you have a chance to read up about all of the candidates. And it's critical that you vote. If you are eligible to vote in Brookline, I implore you to do so. It's so important. Thanks for watching Brookline Interactive Group, and thanks for participating in our town. Hi, I'm Representative Tommy Vitolo, and I'm here with Select Board member and Select Board candidate, Heather Hamilton. We're taking some time to talk about the race and Heather's views on all sorts of things. But before we do that, every broadcast, I don't miss a chance to remind folks how to get in touch with me. 617-872-8921 is my phone number. You call me anytime for something COVID related or not. Tommy.vitolo@mahouse.gov is my email. I'm here to help you, and to do that, you got to let me know. But for now, we're going to talk with Heather. Heather, thank you for doing this with me. It's not one of these sort of fast-paced forums or candidate debates. This is the long form. We get to have more of a conversation. But I'm going to start by asking, the most obvious question. Geez, you've been doing this for more than 2.5 years. Why on earth do you want to do it again?
The 3 years have certainly been busy, and they have certainly flown by. Why do I want to do it again? Amazingly, in 3 years, you don't really get to accomplish all that much for as busy as we are. There are very few things that I have seen the beginning, the middle, and the conclusion of. So I would really like to see the conclusion of a few things that I have helped kind of shepherd along and initiated.
Well, and I look forward to hearing about those But before we get there, uh, it's a little different with you as opposed to the other two candidates because you do have a track record, right? We have been able to watch your performance, but maybe you could tell us a little bit for those of us who haven't been tuning in every Tuesday night. Tell us a little bit about your leadership style. Tell us about how you bring the board to a particular consensus, maybe about your style behind the scenes, where it's not necessarily about convincing the public, but really just convincing people one at a time. How do you get things done?
One of the things that drew me to the select board when I ran the first time, you have to remember that we were coming off of the heels of the presidential 2016, for some of us, unexpected result. And it ignited in me wanting to push up my timeline. I always knew I wanted to run for office. I didn't exactly know what office, and I assumed that I'd be older and more established, and all of these check boxes would need to be by my name. And then I had a conversation with somebody who would go on to be state rep, and he convinced me that there's no time like the present. And that I didn't necessarily need to check all of those boxes for people in Brookline to want to support me. So in the winter of 2016, going into the spring of 2017, I decided to run. And one of the things that will never get old for me, I hope, no matter how long I serve, is that I am a woman at the table. And every really thorny issue that comes before us, I'm grateful. I'm internally grateful to have this opportunity to be in that room where decisions are made and our values are reflected. I really enjoy working with the other select board members. I actually think that this would be an incredibly daunting and very lonely experience if it was one person at the top trying to navigate all of these issues. There is strength in numbers. We all have a completely different viewpoint and bring something to the table. And I think that it is synergy. We actually are better for it. I had a conversation with someone who I guess was trying to offer a critique about their perceived or perception that what I think is one of my strengths is a perceived weakness. And that's that I tend to be quiet. I don't necessarily speak up all of the time, but that's because I'm listening. I'm taking in information. I also don't see the need to repeat information that has already been shared. We have an incredibly long agenda, and I would rather hear from the public than, to voice what I already know about myself. I do offer it when I have the opportunity and when I think it's necessary to share my viewpoint. But I do tend to be quiet, and on top of being a good listener, I think that I choose my words carefully. And I also try to be brief so that people will actually pay attention when I do speak up. And I found that to be fairly effective.
I hope you're not too brief today. We're going to go for 25 minutes, like it or not. So maybe we'll get some long form answers. But that's helpful. We might as well, talk about the immediate challenge, and that's how the town responds right now to COVID-19. And that's actually a really broad set of things that are happening. But what I do want to talk about quickly is the budget. Folks in TV land may not know that this budget is going to be really tough. And it's going to be tough not only because the town will almost certainly see less state aid as state tax revenue from the state is clearly way down, but also the town gets a good chunk of revenue from parking meters and tickets and fines, but also the marijuana tax revenue, meals tax, hotels tax, and all of that is likely to be down over the next year. And so it seems to me Brookline's upcoming fiscal year budget may actually be smaller than this past year, at the very least, certainly not growing at, at 2.5 or 3% per year clip. So what should we expect from the town? And more importantly, how do you think that we should navigate this process over the next month to get a budget over the finish line that upholds our values?
That is a really important question. And I don't know that I have the answers. I can tell you that my greatest fear, the thing that is keeping me up at night right now, is that even our conservative projections, because we kind of did 3 scenarios for the budget for next year based on what we know so far. And I'm worried that even the most conservative projection won't actually be conservative enough.
The most pessimistic projection.
Yeah. So, as in 2008, state aid took a dive, and we are expecting that to go down again. That's kind of the third leg of the 3-legged stool when it comes to the revenue that we generate. The biggest peg is property taxes, and that's both residential and commercial. And then a lot of other things are basically local receipts, which are a lot of those discretionary user-based revenues, which you alluded to. It's trash collection, it is parking meter fees, so on and so forth. So when demand for those services go down, revenues go down. The only thing that we can really count on is the property taxes. And we did allow, some late payments. We're hoping that everyone will eventually find the money. So that, I think, is the bare minimum, most conservative estimate, if we assume 0 for everything else. And that's a scary scenario. So we're trying our best to find ways to maintain level of service for especially our municipal side. But the schools are very important service that we provide. And we are legally obligated to provide quality public education for any child that resides within our borders. And that means that money goes towards it. Now, the school committee is working just as hard, if not harder, on how to tackle that budget. And we will be working together with the town school partnership. Usually that's been 2 times a year. And the BFAC report, the Brookline Fiscal Advisory Committee, put out a report earlier this year that had a number of recommendations. One of the recommendations was that the town school partnership, which is made up of the town administrator and his number 2, the superintendent, his number 2, the 2 people from the select board, including the chair, 2 people from school committee, including the chair of the advisory board, and also the chair of the subcommittee on schools for the AC. They recommended that meet more frequently. And I think that this is the best time to really put that practice into place. We need to be meeting, if not weekly, then bi-weekly, and try to figure out, where are we going to cut? What do we have control over cutting, the discretion, and what are some efficiencies that can be found quickly?
So I want to sort of go a little bit off script, or a little bit poking. There was a conversation today, maybe it was yesterday, but I think it was today on a candidate forum recently, where a question was asked about the school side of the budget. And one of the school committee candidates made the point that there will be COVID-19 related costs to school operations in the fall. Things like PPE, perhaps some technology requirements that they wouldn't face otherwise. Who knows? And this candidate's point was that that's a COVID cost. That's not a school cost. And it's not clear, whose budget is going to eat those costs. And frankly, we don't know what operations are going to look like for schools, what's going to be required. And so how, who do we think, how do we decide who takes the pain, right? Someone is going to get a cut of services if the total expenditures by the town go down, unless there's, some efficiency that I don't know about. How do we figure out what to protect and what not to? What are the things that we care about but are going to have to say not right now? How do we work that out? And what's your role in that?
So I know that we are working rapidly. So the town administrator, along with a couple of members of the select board, school committee, through the town school partnership, they're working very hard on trying to address a lot of these questions. We had a budget for fiscal year 20 and prepared for fiscal year 21. So the town administrator assured us that he took the necessary action, which did include furloughing some part-time employees, to close the fiscal year, current month, fiscal year 20, in the black, which we are required by law to do. But fiscal year 21 is just, it's a moving target. I read a quote that compared it to, I believe this was the chair of one of the committees at the State House, that said trying to predict fiscal year 21's budget right now is like drinking 3 beers and throwing darts. We don't know what estimates are, in construction. We're getting early estimates, but they're varying very widely. Everything is very speculative. Businesses haven't come online. We're going to know a lot more in 3 or 4 weeks. So literally, just like the last 2 months, it has been a day-to-day new reality. So I feel like I'm not really answering the question, but it's because
I appreciate that it's this one day
so
at a
much.
time.
Yeah, and one of the things that I do like about our form of government and town meeting is that there are lots of people. I mean, we're talking hundreds of town meeting members that will look at this budget during town meeting, which will take place at the end of June. And so lots of process and eyes will look at the finished result.
So we talked about the budget. Tell me about maybe 1 or 2 other things that you've been thinking about that are, COVID-19 related. The town has done that maybe you were involved in, should do, that you'd like to push, not necessarily directly related to the budget, but what are some things that the town government has done, could do, should do to help all of us adapt to living, at least we hope temporarily, through this epidemic?
There were 2 things that I had a hand in, for lack of a better word, widening the sidewalks in certain areas in town, and also antibody testing. So a town meeting member approached me about someone who had access to antibody testing through, I believe, MGH. And I quickly put those people in touch with our fire chief, who has been acting as our, emergency responding director through this time, and also our director of public health. That took place last week, and we got, I believe, 600 people tested, 400 that were random samples, so we could do some statistical analysis for the population that is within Brookline, and hopefully draw some conclusions that will form key decisions about what we do, public policy decisions in the next few weeks. The widening of the sidewalk. Oh, okay.
I was going to say, I saw the results of some of the data for those tests, and it turned out that there were effectively 3 different cohorts of about 230 people each. One was first responders, one was a random sample, And one was 230 people who heard there were extra tests left over, and if they could just drive to Lars Anderson quickly, they could have them. And it turned out that in all three cohorts, the fraction of folks who were demonstrating antibodies was between 6 and 8%. Right, so actually a relatively small fraction. In contrast, Chelsea was on the order of 30%. This was a slightly different test taken weeks ago, but it indicates how different communities have very different levels of exposure for a variety of reasons. And so what does this data tell us about Brookline? Not a whole lot, but it will help shape understanding around the region. And I actually had a conversation with the doctor who managed that test, and he said that of all the places that he's done it in, 4 or 5 different communities, that Brookline was by far the most organized, the most efficient. Everybody got in, got out. He said it was incredible. It was a model. He filmed some of it to show others. Really impressed he was with Dr. Jett, with the police department, and with town leadership. So I'm going to go ahead and celebrate the town. I try to when I get the opportunity. But I interrupted you. You're about to tell us about sidewalks.
Well, I'd like to take credit for, part of the reason we've kept the numbers so low is because we put widened sidewalks in 4 key areas in town.
So we didn't pour concrete
very early on.
What do you mean when you say we didn't pour concrete?
Fair enough. Todd went around with a little van and put out cones.
So for folks who haven't seen it,
great staff
parking and created spaces for people on bicycles or on foot where parking spaces used to be. Is that a fair representation?
Yes. So I live on Longwood Ave, which is one of the 4 key routes in town that we did this. And we put up no parking signs kind of the day before to just give everybody some notice that they wouldn't be able to park there. And then we put out cones and we put signage that indicated what that was to be used for. So a demonstration of people, walking past each other while maintaining social distance. Because in the beginning, we're so accustomed to the sidewalks as they are. But when you suddenly find yourself having to avoid that person and build in this 6-foot buffer, some people said, well, you can just jump into the street. That is incredibly unsafe because we're conditioned to not expect that to happen. Not to mention if you're on the side where parking is allowed, okay. So even today, for instance, I went for a walk and there was somebody coming in the opposite direction. And in order to maintain 6 feet, I went into traffic around the parked car, and drivers are just not expecting that, not to mention bicyclists. So it's important for us to have the necessary infrastructure to be able to support this new reality, especially in the zones of our hospitals, grocery stores, the places that were deemed essential. And we knew from prior data where people were going.
So to be clear, these particular locations were chosen not for some sort of recreation value, but in fact because they were transportation routes for folks on foot. Is that fair?
That is fair. There were 2 other proposals that were brought before us to be considered involving closing streets, for some sort of recreation or widening the sidewalks on the way to some of our public parks that were kept open during this time. And we actually, in fact, chose not to proceed with those 2 proposals because we really wanted to get this right. And to be fair, the opposition, they weren't opposing the proposals because everybody could agree that you should maintain social distance. But the crux of the opposition was an assumption that by doing this, we were incentivizing people to come out onto the streets. But we had just spent 3 weeks educating people
Yeah.
that they should only leave the house when necessary. You know, it was a conditioning that led up to this, and we didn't see an uptick.
So I want to shift gears. We talked about COVID for a while. Housing has become a real conversation in this town over the last few years. There's a variety of viewpoints, and when we say housing, we mean different things, of course. Can you tell me about your vision for how the residential landscape should change and what you've been up to make that vision a reality?
One of the first conversations I ever had when I was starting to get involved was a conversation, I guess, at its crux about housing, but it was about transportation. And that was with a town meeting member who found out that I lived in Brookline and tried to recruit me into town meeting. And the conversation went something like, do you know that current zoning requires 2 parking spaces for any new construction of studios and 1 bedrooms? And I didn't believe him. So that was a big reason why I got involved. I felt like that is completely out of touch with today's um, uh, today's clientele, for lack of a better word, of the people who are choosing to move to, especially North Brookline, with all of its great, transit options. The next year is going to really hurt with the T as people feel unsafe, being in tight confined spaces. But over the long term, transit popularity has ebbed and waned, and I'm rooting for it. So I want to do everything within
We've only got another minute.
Yeah, okay.
I want to get into housing.
So, so housing, transportation is a big function of housing, because when you have density, then you can have really good, efficient transit, because you need the numbers to justify the number of trains, the frequency, lowering the costs for everyone. So I envision a Brookline that, if you're a quarter of a mile within a key transit route, then we should absolutely be looking at what current zoning allows, because there are tons of people that want to move here and can't afford to. And I think that is a byproduct of supply and demand not being really at the kind of equilibrium that we need it to be. And I think that if we solve our housing crunch, then we also have more opportunities for, innovation and commercial. And I see them as 2 sides of the same coin. I definitely believe in mixed use. I don't understand this, like, keep business over here and, people have to live over here. So mixed use, we need to figure out the surplus, whether or not it's workforce housing or a lot more micro units for people who want to downsize and free up some of the single family home stock in town. I'm willing to keep it in mind.
Well, thank you very much, Heather, for your service thus far. We've got you in this town until at least June 9th, perhaps another 3 years, of course. The election is on Tuesday, June 9th. Voters will be asked to choose 2 out of the 3 candidates, one being Heather Hamilton. Thank you, Brookline Interactive Group, for having us on, and thank you to the voters who are going to show up on June 9th and really help shape our future. Heather, thanks again. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in person, sometime by Labor Day. We'll see.